Okay, so now we're moving on to Chapter 3. You can probably tell I have a little difficulty saying the word 3. 3, 3, 3. Honestly, in the commentary tracks, I probably should actually remove the opening intro and the credits from each one of these, but I'm not going to. Simply because, as in their current format, it's a little easier, and because, you know, if I want to comment on a song, or if I happen to write something kind of amusing in the credits, I want the opportunity to do that too. Ooh, sorry about that.
What's up?
So these early scenes
I like your
between
shoes.
Scout and Ramona, particularly in like the party at Julie's place, I really wanted to, you know, these are key moments. These are the moments that are going to build the rest of the series. This has got to be like the mutual attraction, or at least the attraction on Scott's part that's going to become the attraction on Ramona's part. So John turned in a pretty good performance for that.
Dude,
It's
I'm
difficult
totally not
to
dreaming.
really comment on
Dude, she's totally
John
real.
and Taylor's, using air quotes here,
Okay,
chemistry,
okay. What do you know about her?
because like they
I
don't,
heard she's American,
you know,
but
they
I
have
know she's
heard
been in
each
town
other.
for at
I
least a
think.
couple of weeks.
Well, John's heard Taylor by now because he watches the episodes, of course, but and Taylor's heard John because I've shown her Super Kaizo World and everything. A quick comment. These two girls here, Sandra and Monique. Sandra, the more bubbly girl, is played by my brother Ted's girlfriend Whitney, who really is a pretty bubbly character as it is. And Monique, the more kind of quiet gothic chick, is played by my other brother's girlfriend Jillian.
How do you know her? I thought
I have 4 brothers in total. 3 of them are older than me. I have 2 sisters. I have 1 brother and 1 sister who are married. It's all over the place. If you can imagine how insane dinner at this house when everybody comes home must be. And then Julie right here is voiced by my sister, Allison, who, as I've said in past commentary tracks, it was a little awkward saying to her, "Do you think you can play this kind of bitchy character?" And she was ultimately up for it. But just like I said, it's not a reflection on her, it's a reflection on her acting ability. And she acted in high school. I saw plenty of her plays in high school. She did great, and I figured,
I don't know what it is about that.
I guess Wallace...
Forget about it, Scott.
Aaron's drunk. Wallace is drunk at least. I'll comment on that a little, I suppose. These scenes with Aaron... Okay, I just finished doing Volume 2 earlier this week, and as I said in the credits of Volume 2, my microphone broke, and my computer's sound system got really, really wonky. And so, like, the quality really was suffering there for a few days, so I had to put off doing this commentary reel and everything. I've been meaning to do this for a while anyway, but I had to put it off even longer.
Hey, there she is.
And... so, like, I don't know, it's been tricky. It's been a tricky process. And, like, it's interesting because listening to it, I don't think it's horribly evident if you're just listening through a computer or through an iPod or anything else. But, like, just how kind of the quality on Aaron and some of Michelle is a few steps below a lot of the other members of the cast. Well, the thing is with that is when I was doing this ages ago, like when this project first started like a long time ago, I had very different standards for it. And you know, I didn't know as much about voice acting as I do now. And so like I just said, you know, speak into my computer's integrated microphone. Just lean in there close and speak to it. And that resulted in a lot of scratching, a lot of my computer has a very noisy fan. It's quite annoying. That's very evident in there. And it's really a bit of a shame on that level because Aaron's voice in particular, because Aaron was hand selected for this role. Wallace is my favorite character in the entire Scott Pilgrim series.
What exactly you
Aaron is a really great actor, and it's unfortunate that you don't get that as much as I wish you could,
I have to order something
because
cool. There's
because
this-
it's too busy with all that noise.
Oh, sorry, I got distracted by the internet. I'm ordering a few CDs. Is this your credit card info right here?
You've got mail. You can. So I hope that's
You've
not
got mail.
overly evident.
Dude,
Although
computer claims I
all
have
of you who
mail.
didn't notice it
Whatever,
before
Scott.
probably will never be
Dude,
able
now
to
I'm reading it.
unhear it
Dear
now.
Mr. Pilgrim, it has come to my attention that we will be fighting soon. My name is Matthew Patel, and I'm a...
I don't have a whole lot of
This is...
very prevailing
is it?
thoughts on this
Boring.
chapter.
Please.
This chapter is really after the early scenes.
Scott.
Yeah?
Are you waiting for the package you just ordered?
No.
Okay, am I?
Maybe.
Okay, sorry about that. My microphone just got moved around a little bit,
Oh,
and I don't
hey.
feel like re-coordinating everything. Sorry, being lazy on this one. I know.
Hey, nice.
remember, how could I possibly
Anamaguchi
forget?
is, of course, playing in the background here. You know, as I said with the soundtrack, it's interesting because I'm a guy who ordinarily I don't notice the soundtrack as much as I think a lot of other people do. Sorry, had to yawn. If I'm watching a movie or I'm playing a video game or any of the sort, I don't notice the soundtrack as much as a lot of other people do. Do I notice it? Yeah. But
Yeah.
if you were to ask me what video game has the greatest soundtrack ever, I wouldn't be able to give you a very educated
I don't know.
answer
Gallivanting.
because like I'm never paying that much attention to the game's soundtrack. I'll catch like one or two of my favorite songs
Sure.
in a particular soundtrack, and those will be the ones that stick with me.
Okay. Thanks.
Like, as an example, the Scott Pilgrim video game. Another Winter is my favorite
Yeah,
song
okay.
from that
I'll see you at
game.
band practice tomorrow night.
And it was brilliant for them to put that song for the first level, for them to put that song's in the demo, and that song was one of the big factors in me deciding to buy it when I did, because I was still kind of on the ropes. I don't know, I don't think I owned all the books even yet, but then I just decided, yeah, I'm gonna do it because that song is awesome.
I can't answer that question right now. I'm gonna go sleep for the next 16 hours.
But yeah, a lot of those things I don't notice as much. If you were, I mean, I'll notice the main theme of a movie and maybe like the single best sounding song in it. But unless I constantly hear
This
it,
guy at work was like,
unless I'm
"Steve,
consistently
do you know
around
anyone in
it,
the band?"
I
And I
can't
was
say
like,
that I remember it all that much. I remember only just little bits of the Scott Pilgrim soundtrack from the movie, so I have to constantly go back and re-review that
That's
and
why
make
we
sure I
can't
get
make it. I mean,
some of the movie in
kinda
there.
suck. We're not worth it.
I'm going to comment on this.
But
Get
Scott,
distracted myself
she's
for a
our
moment. I'm
biggest
going to comment on this. This scene with Neil, where Kim says that Knives is their biggest fan. What that came of was I didn't
Other
have a
than you,
clip
Neil.
of Jim, who plays Neil, running away crying. So I had to like make up something to put there.
Cool.
And I think it's actually a much
Just
funnier
say you're
effect to
gonna
have
stand
the
up or something.
very sad music. That's not actually a sad song. If
Crash
you,
and the boys.
it's labeled like saddest song
Man,
ever,
one
but if you look
band
it
with
up, it just
Crash?
it gets
Boys,
nice
I
after a
hate
bit.
them.
But then the baby Mario crying, I just thought that's even better. So let's just do that. I'm gonna let the credits run. I'll get and just get back in a moment to talking about the rest of my comment on the soundtrack, and then I'll have more to talk about with Chapter 4. Only 3 songs use this one. Huh. Go figure. Okay, so picking up on what I was kind of getting at in Chapter 3, if I'm watching anything or playing a video game or whatever else, I'm honestly the guy who doesn't notice the soundtrack nearly as much as it seems like a ton of other people are. I mean, like, if you were to ask me when I was fresh out of Skyfall, you asked me, what'd you think of the soundtrack? I would have said, that Adele song was awesome. 'Cause that's honestly probably all from Skyfall I would have remembered in terms of the soundtrack. And like, if you ask me what my favorites, if you ask me what I thought of the soundtrack to the Avengers, I mean, I'm sure I would have said, I liked Live to Rise by Soundgarden. That song plays in the credits. That's the song from the credits. I don't honestly remember the instrumental tracks from almost any movie. And if I do, they've got to be, like, really insanely bombastic. Like, I do have several songs from the Matrix soundtrack where there's, you know, there's tons of screaming Latin and full orchestral pits, and those are awesome. But most movies and most anything, I don't retain very much. And I've been trying to do my best in terms of this audiobook to pull off a good soundtrack, to pull off a soundtrack that's serviceable. And obviously I have very different tastes from a lot of people. I listen to a lot of very modern stuff that I'm sure would make a lot of people really hate me if I were to mention on this commentary track that I listen to. But nonetheless, I want to kind of service what I like to listen to, what O'Malley has recommended, bits of soundtrack from the movie, and bits of soundtrack from the video game. I want to do my best to service all four parties. I'm sure they're not very well balanced, but I'm trying here.
We met at that party the other day. Ramona Flowers.
So, actually talking about Chapter 4 here.
You asked me about.
We have our first real interaction between Scott and Ramona. Again,
No, it's cool. That's okay.
first real interaction between them. That was a lot of reals.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have a job.
I think they sound... I think they sound
go out
like
sometime,
two
or, I
people
mean,
who
I
very
mean,
well could be
you just hang
interested
out,
in
get to
each
know
other.
You're new
I-
in town, right?
I hear
I've lived
it.
here forever.
I hear it between,
there are
you know, Scott's kind of
reasons for you to hang out
awkward
with me.
nerdiness.
You're all over the place.
And Taylor's ability to be straightforward in her role with
Your thinking goes
Ramona.
through my head, right? You rollerblade
It's
through my
interesting
head on your way to the
exactly
Liverstone,
how
so
I
that's
came
why I'm
to
obsessed.
choose Ramona.
Wait.
To
Let's
choose
pretend I
choose
didn't say
Taylor
obsessed.
as my Ramona,
totally
rather.
obsessed with you.
I went
I
through a
need to find
few
a
different
new-
actresses
Either that or you need to
I
start
had
hanging out with
considered. I never actually
want
sat
me
down and
to
recorded
hang
anything
out
with any of them.
with you.
But,
Um,
you know, there were always a few people in my mind, and then at one point I thought, well, there's
tonight?
Taylor,
Is
who I have
tonight
known
okay
since
with you?
5th grade, who
Please
has
sign us and
been,
take your stupid
you know, for the
CDs?
most part was a good friend
Yes,
during
sir.
high
Ramona
school. I just
Flowers,
thought,
awesome.
maybe I'll ask
So,
her.
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
And so we got together, we've covered a lot of the stuff. She has a unique
Are you just
voice,
standing
and I mean that in the nicest
Dude,
way
I'm
possible.
waiting on
It's for the love of all things
getting
holy,
nicer,
Taylor,
eh?
don't
I
get on
really
my
need to
case
bark.
about this. I like your voice. I
took
think your
that
voice fits
X
this role
anyway.
very well, because Ramona's a very
On your
unique
coat?
character. She's very hard to pin down. She has
Well,
a lot of
obviously,
traits
one
and a
of
lot
the
of
professors at Xavier's
actions
school
and the
is
like
giving
that,
one
you know,
instead.
are very
One of us is a total
different,
Did you
which
make the
is
patch
good,
yourself?
of course. And
I don't have
heck,
an
I mean,
answer.
depending on what book you're looking into, depending on which book you're reading, I mean, Ramona can look very,
So, how'd you end up
you
in
know,
Toronto?
non-feminine.
Well,
And
got this
Taylor
job
can
at
do both.
Amazon,
Taylor
and I
can,
needed someone here,
Taylor's voice can
and
do
you know,
both,
said
I feel,
Toronto is one of the
pretty
great
well.
cities, so
Who's
So,
dating? Boyfriend?
she was just a good choice for this, in my mind at least.
Anyway, what do you do?
I'm between jobs.
It's funny though when I get down to whenever I think about it too much, and I try not to, just like the substantial age gap between John and Taylor, because Taylor is the same age as me. She's a few months older than me, so she's 20.
Subspace Highway.
John is like, I think he's
What totally
26 or
accident that
27
shouldn't
now.
get you upset.
It's. I haven't been obsessed.
It's
in
funny to
so
think that
long.
that
Really weird.
Well,
he
you're a
sounds,
guy, right?
for the most part, For the most part, he sounds like the same guy who
I
was
was
doing
just guessing
Kaiser
from having
World
seen
years
your
ago, but
boyfriend,
his voice
you
is a little
totally
more
do.
resonant, I suppose. I think it's a little
We're just
different,
poor. We can't afford
but
two
like
beds.
by no means to the point that you
We're
would
not
ever think
gay.
that
What?
this doesn't
No,
sound
Wallace
like
is pretty
John.
Gay, but
Dude,
He
relax,
also
man.
doesn't
I
scream
believe
nearly as much in this, and he screams plenty, but it's not, you know, it's not struggling to stay on top of a pokey because there's nothing but spikes or plants below you and trying to get rid of
You're
Yoshi
probably
as
not
fast as you
that
can.
stupid.
I'm mostly stupid.
And as well, and as like
You're
anyone who's seen
definitely
Volume 2
stupid
too,
if you want to go out with me.
he also
What?
still does the
No,
improvised
I was very
songs,
clever to
which I
convince
was
you.
very happy to see, and I knew that anyway. I've been watching his playthroughs. He
I think it's
he
starting
still
to snow.
he still does that kind of thing, and that's pretty cool.
Where you're from? Where are you from?
I used to have a presiding theory that Ramona is from Iowa,
Where's that?
Where are
because
you
like
Up
I
north?
figured someone like Ramona has to have come from like the most boring place on the planet,
You?
and as an Iowan resident,
Do a lot of skiing?
I consider Iowa one of the most boring places. John and I actually had a conversation about this. I mentioned to John, like, I live in Iowa, a state you probably never heard of, and he said, no, I've heard of that. And I said, well, okay, whatever. I'll bet if you came here, you'd think it's the most boring place ever, and of course his rebuttal was, you ever driven through Idaho?
I'm blind, help!
I know there's a thingy up here somewhere.
This,
Thingy.
I consider Iowa more boring than Canada. Or, you know, I have not driven through Idaho, but I'll bet driving through Idaho is pretty dull.
Hurry.
Can you tell that I'm a gigantic Legend of Zelda nerd? Because if you couldn't tell, I'm a gigantic Legend of
come
Zelda
on.
nerd.
think
I
that
fit
is a decent
I fit
excuse
Zelda
for a
music
lousy
in
day.
about anywhere. Okay, I'll admit, I don't pay much attention to soundtracks, but the simple fact is,
Slip of the
I've been
tongue.
playing Legend of
Anyway,
Zelda games
then
since I
it's
was
not
5
over
years
yet.
old. I know most of their
Then it's
songs
you.
by heart,
There's more than one kind of tea?
and they're what come to mind
What do you have?
whenever I think of, like, any of these situations.
Blueberry, raspberry, ginseng, sleepy time, green tea,
Taylor was very proud to do this entire tea line.
ginger without honey, vanilla
It's such a
almond,
great,
white
it's a great
chamomile,
bit.
blueberry chamomile, decaf vanilla walnut, constant comment, and
Someone should tell me if liver disaster is an actual kind of tea.
What are you having? Did you make some of those up?
I think I'll have sleepy time.
And then there's this next scene,
God,
which,
you look like you're gonna die.
not gonna lie, got really screwed up in production. Simply because I was too lazy to go back and double check it. There might be, like,
Dude,
ultimate
I'm
editions of the
Ah,
audiobook
sorry, it's
released at some point or another, which
Here,
improve
just
timing
myself.
on jokes, which might have some
very
stuff
warm. What is it?
re-recorded. Okay, so
Oh.
to explain this part, what was originally supposed to happen was, right before they kiss, there was going to be the Legend of Zelda chest opening music, and then when they kiss, there was going to be
He's going to
the
bring the
Super
blanket
Mario
from your
World
bed?
do do do
guess.
do 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 do
Maybe
do.
we should both get under it.
But because of the timing,
Well, what about
yeah,
me?
because it shows up later after they first kissed, it sounds like they're. My dad said it sounds like my dad openly told me he thought they were having sex, which kind of freaked my dad out. My dad kind of freaked out at the thought that I was directing something like that. When we finally get to Volume 5, there will be a legitimate sex scene. I have already decided how I'm going to handle it. I'm hopeful it will be perfectly tasteful.
That's cool.
It's not like I'm going to send you home in a
I've got it
snowstorm
planned
or
out, though. I'm not going to spoil it here. I just think it's going to be
I
cool.
reserve the right to change my mind about the sex later.
I think it's going to
This is
capture
cool.
the moment.
Just this.
I think it's
You know,
I think it's going to work out really
It's
well.
not bad.
I think you're awesome. I can't believe
John's good at sounding
Yeah.
vaguely embarrassed during these scenes, which like
Yeah.
it's.
right.
I imagine it helps a whole ton that he's got like.
Really?
It probably helps a lot that we're doing this out of a comic book and he can actually see the facial expressions and everything. Because if you couldn't, this would be a lot harder.
I think this is
Particularly because like when we ran this with John,
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Jeez, that Sounds like Scott woke up way too fast. But anyway, when I was recording with John, I was just reading Ramona's lines dry.
I used
Because
to know a guy who could do that.
I
but
mean,
he said it
while
wasn't that great.
while John
Bring all
is
my
one of my
illusions.
favorite people on the
Did I look like a
internet,
normal person?
I am,
I have to
and
watch
I think we're both thankful I did not
Yeah,
read highly suggestive lines to
No,
him.
I think maybe it was.
I'd like to think we're both glad that I did not do that. I read them completely dry. There were some lines I said, I think we're both better off if I don't read this, and he agreed wholeheartedly.
Well, when the one that got is this good.
Coming up here in a moment, actually, we have my glorious example of stupid Americanism, because here in a minute,
Well, what do you think?
John/Scott mentions
My band has a
coming
show on
home
Wednesday at the
from
Rocket,
taking a
9
bus
p.m.
from
You have a
Dundas,
band?
I think it's pronounced.
Yeah,
We couldn't figure it out because he didn't know what Dundas was. I didn't know what Dundas was, so I just Googled it,
Okay.
and it's a street in Ontario. And me and my height of glorious stupid American had just said, why in the world? Wait, he traveled from Ontario? He lives in Toronto. And John just like, this will be included in a blooper reel if I ever do and I'm hoping to do a blooper reel one of these days. John just like unamused, flat, is like,
5 hours to get here from Dundas.
or Toronto is in Ontario. And I was like,
There's a letter for you.
oh, I'm so sorry. I don't
Letter?
know anything about
Letter?
Canada. Clearly, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you about this girl Ramona, but man, she's so amazing. She's totally.
Oh
I can't-
man, hearing Wallace's
Yeah.
lines over these headphones is just kind of rough.
Yes.
I think later
Sounds
on it's a
better.
lot more clean.
You should break up with your fake high school girlfriend.
Uh,
Well, I didn't have sex with her, Wallace.
I do.
should break up
Scott
with your
and
fake high
Wallace's
school
interactions are always great, though. So
Yeah,
I do still look forward to hearing
letter
them.
Dear Mr. Pilgrim, my name is Matthew Patel, and I'm.
A lot of the
yeah,
timing on this
Saturday,
chapter really got screwy,
blah, blah, blah,
unfortunately.
Fight, schedule, etc.
So the usual.
I guess I'm just not that interested in whatever this gentleman's selling. Oh, hey, we have a show tomorrow at the Rocket. You should come.
How come if you break up with Nice tonight?
Scott's
That poor
finished
misguided
taking
lady.
this. This is one of those songs off of Brian Lee O'Malley's personal soundtrack. I'm glad that I'm hearing it. Only 4 actors this chapter. That's amazing. I think this might be the only chapter thus far where there are more songs than there are chapters. Because there's a lot of music in this one. I'm glad I'm getting exposed to all of this though, because O'Malley's got good taste. And then we go on to chapter 5. And then we finally get around to chapter 5, which is... It's interesting how divisive this chapter is amongst a lot of readers. Because actually I have read reviews for this comic series, and I've seen what a lot of people think of Scott Pilgrim as a whole. And I know a lot of people actually view this as like, this chapter is wholly out of place. What the heck is it doing here? And other people are like, this is the moment this comic became awesome.
Yeah, she went to the bathroom or
And
something.
as someone who first learned about Scott Pilgrim from watching the the trailers that were showing on TV, I mean, like I felt like this was taking a really long time. I was just like, I was enjoying it. I enjoy slice of life stories very much. I love slice of life. It's a great genre. But and then we finally get here, and I'm like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. This is what I came here for.
Okay,
And that is how I first got
as you know,
exposed
we're playing a
to
show
Scott
tomorrow with
Pilgrim.
Crash
What
and the boys.
I was at my cousin's house.
Crash,
We
Wilson,
were
sings and
laying
plays
down for the
guitar.
night. There were,
Guy
you
Joel
know,
on bass? I hate that.
we were in his bedroom.
Don't you hate
I was in
all
the
bass
guest bed,
players?
and we were
Well, I don't hate
we were
myself.
watching Futurama. Actually, we were watching Futurama
I
on
found out
Comedy
they got a new
Central,
drummer recently.
and a commercial for
Old guy
Scott
went
Pilgrim
insane
versus the
and lapsed
World
into a
came
coma.
on, and I just kind of sat there like, holy
It's a
crap, what was that?
Girl.
They got a girl drummer?
I texted my girlfriend
She's their secret
immediately,
weapon.
and I was like,
Call her
"Hon,
Trasha.
we're gonna go
She's
see
8 years
Scott
old.
Pilgrim versus the World,"
I
and
hear
she
they
had never
discovered her
heard
at the
anything
Pacific
about it.
Mall arcade playing Drum
And
Mania.
like, a month
She
later
has so
we
much
went
ADD,
to
it's not even
see
funny.
some other
I
movie,
hate
and
her
we got
so
the trailer
much.
for it, and she was
Well, let's do
wowed.
it.
She
Let's
was
practice.
actually
We've got
really
24
excited.
hours.
And since then, I've fallen in love with the
24
series. I've
hours
become
later.
very saturated with
Hey
it,
guys.
and she's gotten tired of hearing about it. In spite of playing a
hang out
voice
with us
in the
while-
series, she's gotten
So,
quite sick of a lot of it.
This is
What a
Jen.
fail on my part. And we didn't
My
manage to go
brother's
see it in the
boy
theaters. We
plays
just kept putting it
roommate.
off. We sucked at that.
nice.
I don't. It's for better or for worse,
Yeah.
because we were in
Thanks for
Barnes
coming,
and Noble
Six.
a
You're my
long
only
time
friend.
after, and I decided I was going to
Aw,
start buying the
I'm
comics.
always there for my little brother's crappy band shows. You know
So
that.
actually, in terms of here in Chapter 5, I
Yes?
fill in a lot of the blanks for roles. I didn't want to actually, but I couldn't get a hold of other people fast enough. Partly because I spent a ton of this chapter just getting ready for that friggin' song at the end. And
Hey,
even now,
everyone, this
even
is-
now, I don't. That song does not sound all that great to me. But I just, and you know, me and John went back and forth on it. On whether he was gonna sing his part, whether he should just speak it.
These are the boys.
I mean, it was quite it was a painful process. And then I finally put it together. It's adequate, I think, but it's hard to say, and it was a long process, and I'm not planning on doing anything quite like that again anytime soon. You know what else? There are no instrumental tracks for that. I had to pull that off as best I could all by myself. And as someone who is not musically inclined, as the guy who does not notice the soundtracks during movies, that was rough. That sucked. So, Crash Wilson was originally supposed to be played by my brother-in-law, Kyle, but we didn't exactly have a good chance. That song actually was 0.4 seconds long. I actually timed it. That was actually 0.4 seconds of Winter Madness by Winter Sun. And I'm going to do my best to get some more Winter Sun in here later.
From the balcony. And
It's called We Hate You.
Die.
Please die.
Sweetest song for me.
And this song's right from the movie. This is probably the best example, because one of these songs is by Winter Sun, and I'm a Winter Sun fan. One of these songs is from the movie, and then here in a few minutes, I play the theme from the video game Crash and the Boys backwards.
Have you noticed
And I'm going to comment on that, because, like, I will admit, the original plan for that scene, I was going back and forth. I thought it might be really cool. I thought it would be really sweet if I took the Song of Healing from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, like a whole orchestral score of it or something, and played that backwards. Oh yeah, there's a 3 Days Grace song right here too. I had forgotten about that. Just a few seconds of one, but they're Canadian, why not?
Song kills audience.
Okay, so originally this was going to be the Song of Healing backwards, because, although of course you can't tell from these recordings, I'm a big creepypasta fan,
They can't be serious.
and I got introduced to creepypasta via the Haunted Majora's Mask story, which is now totally out
We
there
have to play
everywhere.
next.
I can't watch a Majora's Mask video anymore without a dozen comments about that story. I was rather proud of that though, the baby I was born to destroy you, loud and slow and everything. I think that fits the mood quite well. But ultimately I decided, you know, this has nothing to do with Zelda. This has nothing to do with Majora's Mask. It is about a song that kills people, but even the Song of Unhealing doesn't do that. And I thought, that's gonna date this thing bad. And I don't know that I mean, Scott Pilgrim is kind of an entity that is gonna be dated in a few years anyways.
What the?
You know, honestly, nothing's terribly wrong with
dare
something
you.
being dated if it's intentional, if you know what you're doing. It'll last better than you think it will, even if it is
Sit
dated.
over there. You're
My
not
my
dating
uh
another guy
my
for me.
brother Whitney,
No.
who plays
This is
Sandra,
Scott's friend, remember?
her
This is
quote
Scott's
unquote little
actual
sister for,
roommate.
you know, Big
Wallace
Brother's Big Sister
Wells.
program. She supplied the one line for Trasha here.
Sure.
So I actually got a fairly
We're
young
playing the
girl to do that
corpses
line.
Anyway, so let's go.
Okay.
And then here we go, the moment when that
We
either
are
made
sex
this
for
comic or
mom!
ruined it for
1,
you,
2, 3,
depending
4.
on who you are.
You never even
I think there maybe should have been some more music there. Okay, I wanted this to be really bombastic. There needed to be like noise everywhere during this fight scene, and I think that ultimately goes pretty well. I think the pacing in this fight works out pretty well. I think I learned more by the time I did the Lucas Leaf fight.
Okay, thank you, Wallace.
Of course, there's not all that much fighting in the Lucas Leaf fight.
This guy is toast.
I'm particularly
Doesn't he know
I'm particularly proud of the air juggle scene and the just punch, and then finally the knockdown.
New personal best, Scott.
So,
I don't know. I think while the song is pretty screwy,
Who the hell
the
are
song
you
is
anyway?
nowhere near what I was really hoping I could get it to be. I think the fight scene still flows pretty well. I'll say this much. I feel like I did a lot better in Volume 2, particularly with the Simon Lee boss fight. I'm looking forward to talking about Volume 2. Because I think I learned a lot during Volume 2. I think there's a lot of better stuff in Volume 2. And hopefully we're going to get better and better as we go on to 3, 4, 5, and 6. Until we finally have something really, really epic for Volume 6. That is my hope.
Come on,
That would
man,
be really
bitch.
nice.
Any embarrassing stories?
There's a lot of just...
It was in the 7th
I do
grade.
like the whole back and forth during that fight. There were a lot of nice sound effects. I'm going to go out of my way to credit Sound Bible and Sound Dogs for a lot of these sound effects. Those are great websites for anyone, and SoundPond too. For anyone seeking either free or easily accessible sound bites, go to those websites. They're really great. You know, if you pay anything, it's very minimal. I haven't paid anything yet.
We only kissed the once. And we were quits after something like
I like,
he didn't really
I do
feel
like,
until
I
high
feel like
school.
Taylor had an
And
experience
by that
not
time,
unlike
we
Matthew
were fine.
Patel.
Dude, wait.
I feel like Taylor probably has had experiences not unlike a lot of these bad guys.
If you want to fight me,
I think the singing all goes pretty well, and the sound effects go pretty well. It's just a question of when and where the sound all syncs up, and the singing links up with the fight scene. Yeah, like the Fireball Girls thing. That was pretty cool. I think there is a lot of other problems. Yeah, there's a lot of really, I can't remember what the word for it is. Choppy. This scene gets pretty choppy, but it's kind of made up for by all the Dragon Ball Z sound effects, which is pretty cool because I'm a huge Dragon Ball Z nerd.
Open your eyes up. Maybe you'll see.
KO.
Sweet coins.
I do like how this sounds, even without pictures. I do like how this sounds.
How much did he leave?
Man, $2.10. That's not even enough for the subway back home.
Dude,
$2.10.
I'll lend you 15 cents.
He left 210
Wicked. Let's
behind.
get out of here before everyone gets really mad at me.
And then we have the bus scene, and for anyone who's far enough along in Scott Pilgrim, who might be wondering, for anyone who's read all the books, who knows the information,
Out with me?
yes, the glow will be addressed, probably in an audio way. I'll figure it out. Because the glow, for those of you who know Scott Pilgrim, the glow is a big deal. It was a real shame to lose it in the movie. I intend to do the glow justice because it's one of the most important plot devices in this entire series.
Ex-boyfriends. If you
But
like-
with that, for the most part, I've talked through the entirety of Volume 1. I'm looking
6
forward to
or
talking
7?
through Volume 2 because,
You dated
you know,
7
Volume 1
people
was
days.
very much a learning experience.
all at
Volume 2, I feel
once.
like I had a lot more fun with.
So,
I feel like I was learning a lot more about the
Defeat.
acting process and voice acting process and all of that with Volume 2. So
Yeah,
I'm looking
well,
forward to talking
I
about
guess.
that one.
Pretty much.
so they come one at a time?
Not all at once. I don't know about one at a
I think this is a good. I think this last scene
okay with that.
works out pretty well.
Cool.
I think it kind of sets up everything that's going on. And I didn't want to make a sound effect for the glow yet. For those of you who don't know what I'm getting at, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it. But because it should be a little questionable as to whether or not the glow is there, whether or not there are those shiny lines around her head. Yes is kind of an odd syllable to end Precious Little Life on, but there we go. And then we end with the Bollywood music, which is awesome. I mean, again, having not paid a terrible amount of attention to the soundtrack, it's Scott Pilgrim from the game has a great soundtrack. This is a great song. And then I credit everyone in the credits, and I credit every song I've used in the last credit of every book, because I feel like that's important. And if I credit the entire series here at the end, we might have like a 10-minute long credit sequence, which I would not be opposed to. So that's it on Volume 5. On Chapter 5 and Volume 1. Peace.